Yeah. So, yeah. So you will be wondering why this particular slide on the screen. Well, we are going to do. We had briefly discussed perhaps maxima minima, but today we'll discuss it again and refine further a lot more than what we had done earlier. Earlier, I guess we had done that if f has a maximum at a point, the derivative must be 0. If f is a minimum at a point, then f is differentiable and has a maximum at a point, the derivative will be 0. F has a minimum and at a continuous differentiable and minimum at a point, then the derivative will be 0. But I had argued and told you that the other way is not true. So how do we try to resolve that? When is it true? When is it not true? Etc. etc. Somebody tried to say something? Okay. So the way to read this version of Taylor's polynomial is the following. Let's take the simplest case, n equal to 1. Okay. So, so if n is 1 and if f dash is 0, then this will be fy itself, pnyh. This part, the approximation is this by h power n, which goes to 0, which says that this is the remainder term is a lower order term. Okay. So let me now switch this to blank. Yeah. So suppose so if fx at point x0 there is a minimum. Okay. So we had seen the following, that then we had argued that f dash x0 should be 0. How? Because so where Rx0h is that remainder, so that's a lower order term. This whole thing can be called lower order term, which goes to 0 faster than h, or Rx0h goes to 0. So so if fx0h is greater than or equal to fx0 and f dash x0 is not 0, suppose f dash x0 is doesn't matter, however small, suppose it is bigger than 001. Okay, then what we argue is that as h becomes suitably small, this Rx0h will go to 0. So h times Rx0h will be less than h times f dash x0. So we can make this itself less than 0.0001, for example, for small enough h. And then h times f dash x0 will be larger than h times this in absolute terms. So if we take h small but positive, this term will definitely dominate this term. And this is minimum. So I have to take h negative. Yeah. So if I take h negative, this quantity will be small, negative, small but negative. This will be even smaller, and then fx0 plus h, this will become smaller than fx0. Okay, so the argument goes follows that if f dash x0 is not 0, say it is positive, very small number, okay, we can choose a h small enough such that Rx0h is even smaller than this chosen number. Then h dot Rx0h will have the same sign as h dot f dash x0 versa. Okay, and so the sum will have the same sign as just this term h times f dash x0, and therefore by choosing h negative, okay, but small, we can make fx0h smaller than fx0. We'll be violating that x0 is the minimum. Okay, so if at x0 this is minimum, this is one way of looking at it. We could have done it via the last time we had argued by the derivative definition. Let's see how we had done it last time. So if it is negative, if f dash x0 is x0 is the minimum of the function, then this is numerator here is greater than equal to 0, no matter what h is, with small enough within that interval. So numerator is always positive, denominator is the same sign as that of h. So by taking h negative small, we can show that this ratio is negative. So this is less than equal to 0. And by taking h small but positive, we'll get that this ratio is greater than equal to 0. So we could argue that f dash x0 is greater than equal to 0 in one half, and for one side of h, and for the other side of h, f dash x0 is less than equal to 0. Therefore, f dash x0 is 0. Right? Now, essentially the same argument works with max. If x0 is the maximum, then the numerator now of this part, this is negative. So by taking h small but positive or negative, the ratio can have both the signs, positive or negative. And both of them being close to f dash x0 will force you that f dash x0 is 0. Okay. So this part we had done earlier, that if at x0, either the function either attains the maximum or minimum, and remember, this is only if x0 belongs to the open interval AB. Even if the function is differentiable in the closed interval, this argument fails at the endpoints because we are allowing x0 plus h, where h is both positive as well as negative. That means, and it should be in our interval of definition. So, maximum or at the maximum or a minimum, the derivative is 0 is only for endpoints. And simplest example,
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you give a quick recap of the previous slides? I mean, I joined just now due to some reasons.
Yeah, so I started with maxima, minima, and I argued that we can do it also from the Taylor's theorem in another way. Okay. So as I explained in earlier sessions, that multiple ways of proving the same thing are always useful, because you never know in what, if you somewhere else you get this idea, which of the two ideas will work. You want to prove something similar. So therefore, once we try to argue via the Taylor's theorem that this f dash x, if you have a maximum at a point or a minimum at a point, f dash x0 should be 0. And in that, the focus was that the this h times r x0 h will always be in a magnitude smaller than h times f dash x0 if f dash x0 is not 0. And that could be used to prove maxima, minima. And then we came to this, that this is the thing which we had seen earlier, that just from the definition of the derivative, we can argue that at the minimum or at a maximum, the derivative must be 0. And the warning is that this one works only when you are looking at the endpoint, when you are not looking at the endpoints, when the maxima or minima is at the internal point of the interval on which the function is defined. And this is the simplest of example that one can think of. Fx equal to x on the closed unit interval. Of course, minimum is at 0, maximum is at 1, and derivative is not 0 at either of the 2 points. The derivative is just identically equal to 1, right? So, so various places at I spent a long time at ISI, and we used to do, like at CMI, we used to have entrance exam. And one of my favorite questions, favorite kind, not this exact question, but would be to give a function which will be monotone, not like fx equal to x, but some sine, cosine, something. But ensuring that on the and given interval AB, at which the throughout the derivative remains positive. Okay, and ask questions about does this function admit a maximum, does it admit a minimum, and this and that. And believe me, students would say that they'll derivate, there is no point at which it is 0, therefore the function doesn't attain a maximum, therefore the function doesn't attain a minimum, because they're somewhere just, they have not understood what this derivative has to do with the maxima, minima. They've just mucked up that, if the maxima or minima, then the derivative is 0. So they compute no 0, no maxima, no minima. So at least, even if not the proof, try to remember the rationale behind the result, okay, or some examples. Okay. So, all right. So, first warning that maxima or minima at an internal point and the function being differentiable tells you that the derivative must be 0. Then, I guess last time I had already discussed, but let's again visit that this is a necessary condition, this is not a sufficient condition. So in other words, you can have a function f dash is 0, but the function neither is maximum nor minimum. The and derivative is 0 at x equal to 0. But clearly this is not a fx equal to x cube. At 0 it is 0. The derivative is also 0. At 0 it is 0, but for x positive this is positive, for x negative it is negative. So at one shot we have argued that this is neither a maximum nor a minimum. Right? So if maximum or minimum internal point, derivative 0. Derivative 0 may be maxima, may be minima, or maybe neither. So what is the thing to do? So if we, instead of x cube, we have taken x square, then of course at x equal to 0 we have minimum. And then at x equal to 0 for the g is a maximum. So now at one shot we have examples of these functions are defined on an open interval. The point 0 is an internal point, so it's not a problem of the endpoints. Okay. The question is, of course, by examining the function, by knowing the function, we know is it maxima or a minima, and here that it is not a maxima or minima. How can we do it through test? Because if a given function is so complicated, we can't figure out. That is why we are trying to study how do we do it from differentiation, right? So can we come up with some other thing which will firstly decide is it a maxima or a minima or something else? And if it is a maxima or a minima, how to decode which one of the two? So I guess you may have done it in class 12 rule that, you know, the second derivative. So what is the second derivative of this? So here at x equal to 0, our f double dash is positive. Here g double dash is negative. And here f double dash is 0, f double dash positive, f double dash minus 2. So f double dash also exists and continuity may not be required, but best to assume exists and continuous. So if derivative, second derivative is positive at x0, then it is the minimum. If second derivative is negative, it is maximum. And we, just like our tests of convergence of a series, in two cases there we had this, that something happens, we can argue yes, no, and one undecided. So f double dash x0 also 0 tells you this is undecided. And best is to give an example for the undecided, then we go to our argument. So I mean, x cube gave me a thing, but if x power 5, what happens? F dash is 0, f double dash is, sorry. If we take these three examples, what is f double dash of 0 for this? This is also 0.
6x squared.
Huh?
Oh, wait, no, sorry, 12x squared.
Yeah, f double dash is 12, but at 0 it will be 0. Right?
Yes.
Whereas the first function, we'll prove it later, but alternately we can figure out that since it's an even number, x power 4, for every x is even number, it is always non-negative, and at 0 it is 0. So this is a minimum, right? Likewise, for G it is a maximum. And here it is neither. So f double dash of all these three functions at 0 is 0, but all three possibilities are there. Minimum, maximum, or is not a minimum, maximum. There is no minimum or maximum at that point. So what to do, we will see. But let us focus on why should we have that f double dash less than 0 says x0 is maximum. And this is where the Taylor's theorem and that alternate version that I had talked about so we have that. So now suppose f and f dash f double dash exist continuous, etc. So f x square times r x0 x, where this converges to 0 as h goes to 0, right? So now at x0 f attains a maximum, and we already showed that that says f dash of x0 should be 0, so that is 0. Now I'm trying to argue that f double dash should be negative. So x0 fx0 is maximum, so that says that this quantity fx0 plus h is less than equal to fx. This quantity is 0. This fx0 plus h minus fx0 is less than equal to 0. So that tells us that sum of these two quantities should be, this is negative. This is the sum of these two quantities is equal to fx0 plus h minus fx0. fx0 is maximum, so this is negative. fx0 plus h minus fx0 is negative. So for h small, this is negative. Divide out by h square. So f double dash x0 must be negative. If f double dash x0 is not negative, then there will be a contradiction. If it is positive, we will get a contradiction. So f double dash exists, so what we are saying is that at a point, if a maximum is attained, first derivative is 0, and if the second derivative exists and is non-zero, then it must be less than 0. And once again, the proof is that this term circled in yellow, the sum of the two terms circled in yellow is negative because f dash is 0 and thus fx0 plus h minus fx0. This circle term is this difference, which is negative. And Rx0h is anyway going to 0. So the sign of the term which is circled in yellow is the same for small enough h, is small, same as that of the sign of f double dash x0. So f double dash x0 positive will give you a contradiction. And where does this argument fail? If f double dash x0 is 0, we know the argument fails. But where does it fail? Well, this can also be 0, and then Rx0h can be small, but it can be the appropriate sign as is being given in required by minimum or maximum of f at x0. So we get a contradiction to our assumption only when f double dash is not 0. So this is not proving that if the if you have a maximum, then at second derivative, if it exists, must be negative. No. If it is non-zero, then it should be negative. And by changing sign from f to minus f, likewise, we can get that if it is a minimum, then their second derivative should be positive. So, and let's see what happens if second derivative is also, if it is if all these three are 0, but first three derivatives are 0, and as of now, we don't even know if it is one more time differentiable or not. Okay, then what do we get? That f x0 plus h is equal to fx0 plus the Taylor polynomial term up to 3D terms at x0 will be 0 because it is this time something, this times h square, this times h cube. So all that remains is the remainder term, h cube r x0 h. Let me call this r3 because it is remainder term after 3.3 expansion up to third degree. So inconclusive because this can always be positive r3 x0h. We have nothing more than that it goes to 0 as h goes to 0. So it could be positive always, it could be negative always, or it could be changing signs. And that is how we had already seen the three examples that the derivative, all these three, the second derivatives are zero, but yet minimum, maximum, you can't determine. So I should have actually taken a third case where yeah. So if you have the first two derivatives zero and suppose the third derivative is not zero, it exists but is not zero. Then fx0 plus h is fx0 plus f triple dash x0 h cube plus h cube r3 h0 h. The remainder term is small. So now we can argue that the function is does not have either a maximum nor a minimum at x0. So suppose this is positive, then this is how one says that for h small, fx0 plus h is greater than equal to fx0 because f triple dash x0 is positive. We are multiplying it by h cube, which is positive because if I take h positive but small. And the third degree, this remainder term, we can ignore because by taking h small enough, this one will dominate the f triple dash x0 h cube term will dominate the yellow circle term will dominate the green circle term. That is where h r3 h0 h going to 0 as h goes to 0 comes into the picture, that if you add these two, whatever is the sign of the yellow circle term will be the sign of the sum when for sufficiently small h. So for h small h positive, this is there, and likewise h small and actually we can get a strict inequality because of non-zero thing. Yeah. So suppose f triple dash at x0 is 0.01. I want to argue that for h small, fx0 plus h is bigger than fx0, right? So So in other words, R3x0h going to 0, using that I've taken my epsilon to be 0.0, not 0.0. Something smaller than 0.01. Okay. So 0.005. If I take this as my epsilon, I choose a delta such that R3x0h is less than 0.00h. Now let us look at the for mod h less than delta, what happens to the sum of these two, the green encircled and the yellow encircled terms. The first, the yellow encircled term is h cube times 0.01. And the green encircled term is at most 0.005 times h cube. So if h is less than delta, so if I take h to be delta by 2, whatever be my delta, if I take h to be delta by 2, then the sum will be, the sum of these two will be delta 2 cube times whatever number, but positive. Whereas if you take h to be minus delta by 2, that will be negative, the sum of these two. So the argument which I have written in the bottom left corner is basically the argument which says that once the green circle term is some quantity times h cube, the other green encircle term is h cube times some function which is going to 0. So effectively, when you add the two, we can ignore the green encircle term and the sign of that sum will be same as the sign of the yellow encircle term. Okay, so this one dominates. The yellow encircle term dominates. Okay, so right now we have shown that if first two derivatives at x0 are 0 and the third derivative at x0 is not 0, then that point can neither be the maxima nor minima. For geometric reason, it is called a point of inflection. Exactly why it is called inflection of what, etc., etc., we won't go to that. But it's not maxima or minima, but a point of inflection. One side is negative, it reduces, other side it is. So geometry, the curve is something like this. So for when we draw a tangent, so somewhere this is the point of inflection. So tangent to the left of that is, the line is below the tangent, and then the tangent keeps coming closer, somewhere here like this, and after that like this. So so minima maxima at the point, the tangent so at the point x0, where the derivative is 0, says that the point y equal to I mean the derivative is parallel to the x-axis at derivative 0. So when you have minima or maxima, the entire curve lies either below or above. Whereas here, what is happening is that the derivative is still parallel to the x-axis because f dash x0 is 0, but the curve is neither to the left nor to the right. One side it is below, one side it is above, and that is why it is neither minima nor maxima. Okay. And if you have a smooth enough curve, then you can see that if your function is like fx equal to, let's say, x power 13. Okay. So you keep differentiating, it will still remain the derivative will keep remaining 0. So at even and odd, you will keep seeing that at one point the curve is on one side, the other time one side remains the same side, the other side flips up. So it is half up, half down. One more derivative you do, one more, and then it both comes to one side. Okay. So the curve on the this blue is the point of inflection, is passing through the point of inflection. Okay. But why the word inflection, I still don't know. So to complete this now, we get a much higher order of understanding about differentiation, maxima, minima. That n times differentiable at x0 f is n times differentiable. So in other words, we have a function which is differentiable as many times as we want, and if we are keep difference, you have a point x0 at which f dash is 0. You differentiate it again, f dash is again 0. You differentiate it again, f dash at x0 is again 0. So you keep on differentiating, assuming that all these derivatives exist, up to the first n at which it is not 0. So yeah. So first integer at which it is not 0 is n. Then if n is even, then the first one at which it is not 0 is minimum, is positive, then the function has a minimum at that, and if it is less than 0, it has a maximum at that. So of course, last class we had taken an example where f dash for every point was 0, f dash n derivative at a point was 0 for all, but it was not a constant function. So this is not it is not a complete characterization of, you can determine maxima, minima by just looking at the derivatives, no, but large class of examples. All derivatives existing but being 0 at 0 is a rare thing. We have to work hard at that. Okay. So if you have a function which is differentiable large number of times, then you can determine the maxima or minima by looking at, first of all, you have to look at f dash and which all points it is 0. So maxima or minima, even if it exists, it has to be one of those points. Then you take one such point at which f dash x0 is 0. Then you will start looking at higher order of derivatives at that point. And if you keep getting zeros, the first time you see a non-zero value, that being odd or even decides the picture. So if it is even, it is this, and if it is odd, point of inflection. And the fx0 plus h is fx0 plus the Taylor polynomial. Now that up to n terms, Taylor polynomial up to n terms, n minus 1 terms at x0 are 0. So it will be in fact, for argument's sake, what we can do is simply fx0 plus h power n times fn x0 plus rn x0h. And rn x0h goes to 0 as h goes to 0. And if fn x0 is positive, then for small enough h, fn x0 is positive, then small enough h, the green encircled thing will also be positive, and multiplier is h power n. So if n is even, then h power n is always positive, and therefore the h power n times the green encircled object will have the same sign as the sign of fn at x0. And that tells you that if fn at x0 is negative, then x0 is a maximum, because you deviate even a little bit, you're going down, and if it is positive, the other way. So this okay. So if all the other derivatives at x0 were 0, earlier ones, and the nth one is non-zero, then this frame captures that n even x0 is a maximum, okay. And let me argue once again why. So first of all, we had the Taylor series, a Taylor expansion up to nth degree plus remainder. Once we do Taylor's expansion up to n degrees and remainder, first n minus 1 terms of the Taylor polynomial vanish, because we have assumed that fn at x0, fk of x0 is 0 for k less than n. So all those terms have vanished. The only survival term there is the nth order term and then the remainder term. Then by clubbing the two, we have write it as h power n times the sum of these two. And then we get that by taking h small enough, the sign of the green encircled term is the same as the sign of fn x0. And that tells you that that term being fn x0 being positive tells you a minima, and that being negative tells you it's a maximum. And crucially being used is n is even, so that h power n, whether h is on the small but positive or small but negative, is always, h power n will always be positive. That is where the even thing is coming in. And the same thing will tell you that if it is odd.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, I mean,
Yeah.
Sir, this thing will not change the argument, but are you like ignoring the coefficients right now, like the n factorial?
Oh, yeah. That will not change the argument. Yeah, the n factorial should have been there, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I like to write this with this n terms and then remainder, but the same argument one could write without using the original version of the Taylor's theorem, which is popular in all books, where you have up to n minus let me write that also, because better, as I explained, so you have nth degree, f is differentiable n times, then if it is, this is fx0 plus h is fx0 plus summation k equal to 1 to n minus 1 fk x0 by k factorial h power k plus fn at x0 plus some for theta between 0 and 1. So in whatever way I had written, the alpha beta term can also be expressed in this way, whatever the Taylor polynomial, the original version, not the second version which I gave. So you have function is differentiable n times, you have taken the polynomial of n minus 1th degree polynomial plus the remainder term. Remainder term is nth derivative at some intermediate point between x0 and x0 plus h. So here I have written it as x0 plus theta h, where theta is somewhere here. But theta itself is a function of h. It's not a constant. Yeah. Now, so if n up to n minus 1 degree, all the polynomial terms are 0, the derivatives are 0 at x0, that says that this Taylor polynomial is vanished up to n minus 1 terms. And now you have fx0 plus h is equal to fx0 plus this fn x0 plus theta h power n by n factorial. As h goes to 0, this converges to fn x0. So, and that is not 0. So this quantity is converging to a non-zero quantity. And if n is odd, then h power n, the sign will depend on positive, negative h. So the two signs of this, as for h small, the two sides will be different. Whereas if n is even, then h power n by n factorial always has the same sign. So the error term after this expansion for small enough h will have the same sign as the nth degree derivative at x0. So you can work out the argument I just now talked about at either of the, you can use either of the versions of the Taylor theorem to work out this, that if yeah, so our statement was that you have f is n times differentiable at x0, and if k all the derivatives up to n minus 1 are 0 and the nth derivative is not 0, then when n is even, the positive or negative tells you the maxima minima, and if n is odd, then you tell that it's a point of inflection. So for essentially, this gives you a fairly complete solution for maxima minima in most examples, except that I should stress that the maxima minima that we are talked about is what is called the local maxima minima, because so here it is 0, here it is 0, here it is. So these are all points at which you are getting a maxima or minima, but it is only immediate neighborhood. It is not the maxima minima on the entire interval. Okay. So what we get from the this derivatives is a function whether it has a local maxima or minima. Local means in some interval around the point of which we are talking of x0. Okay. So we have local maxima, several of them, but the suppose this red thing is my function. So the f dash being 0 is giving us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 solutions. All of them will satisfy that it's a maxima minima, but in each case it is local. But the true minimum or maximum, if it's a closed interval, is happening at the endpoints. So just to conclude, if you have a function which is given on an interval and you are asked to find maxima or minima, simplest thing to do is you look at all the points at which the derivative is 0. You take those points, you take the two endpoints, and at each of these points, just compute what is the value of the function to figure out which is the minima or maxima out of these. Okay. So time is passed, but perhaps you don't have a class after this and I can spend some more time. I'm not going to teach something, but any questions or answers or comments, we can talk. Perhaps this maximum minima is important enough that I will separately write down a statement and write down the proof mathematically. Okay.
Sir.
Yeah.
So I was while you were doing this also, I was thinking about like so actually you had drawn a picture to show that like when there is an inflection point, like the derivative is going to be positive, then go to 0 and then positive again.
Uh-huh.
So I was wondering if we could also show this result on the higher derivatives and maximum minima by inducting, because it looks like when you take the derivative, like if the function has an inflection point
Uh-huh.
and you look at the derivative, it will have a
So that,
either a minimum or a maximum at the result for lower.
yeah, except that, if you have to keep differentiating,
Like number of derivatives for lower value of n to
it's difficult to
show
draw
that,
on me.
like so sorry sir, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that?
No. See, the problem can be that you may have to go up to 20 derivatives, so to speak, to get what you are wanting for, right?
Yes, sir. But what I mean is, could we use induction to prove the result for arbitrary n? Because it seems that like if you have an inflection point, then when you differentiate, you will have to. So suppose that the first 19 derivatives are 0 and the 20th derivative is non-zero. And you have your function, you differentiate once. Now you're in the case where you have a function and the first 18 derivatives are 0 and the last one is non-zero. And so it seems that we could use our result for n is equal to 19 instead of 20.
Yeah.
And so in this way could we
but writing out a statement of what are you going to do by induction? I mean, here the proof that we wrote is simple enough. Why do we need induction for that? It can be done.
That's
I
true,
would.
sir. Yeah. Yeah.
Straight away, writing the nth order expansion and getting the thing is simple enough. How will we write the induction hypothesis?
Yeah, I think we could, but it makes sense that this is like simpler and neater. Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering if this was formal enough, or if I needed to do any tweaking to make this, like, to actually be able to do this formally by induction. But yeah, it makes sense that writing out directly the expansion is.
So if at all here
neater.
induction, we will need to do induction on k, where we are looking at if up to 2k all are 0, and then we are saying what happens up to 2k plus 2.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So we'll have to do induction on k, where we are looking at up to 2k terms, you see, because otherwise even odd thing, writing an induction hypothesis will not be easy.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a way it can be done, but we can straight away write it down and take the two cases, n even, n odd, rather than bringing induction. But yes, it can be done.
Okay, makes sense, sir. Yeah, thank you.
What can we say about maxima or minima if all the n derivatives vanishes? That is, if the function is n times differentiable. Okay, so you are trying to say that, you have, let's say you have a function which has only one derivative, and at that is 0, and second derivative is not even there. Now what do we do? Is that your question? Yeah. So this trick doesn't tell you much about that case. Okay. So so let's say you look at let me think. If I take fx equal to mod x power 1.5, then fx equal to 0, it is minimum. But if I take then again f dash x will be 0, but both cases, in this it is a point of inflection. So derivatives doesn't give you, I don't know if there is some other tricks available which might give you this, how to differentiate this, but by this, beyond one derivative, you don't have any derivatives. So you can't conclude using just the derivative term by analyzing the derivatives. Okay. So if a function has exactly one derivative and that derivative is 0, what to say? I'm sure people have thought about it, and there must be some complicated things, not through calculus, but by some other tricks maybe. Or in this one, what you can do is you can do a simple one-to-one transformation. Just take a higher order degree and do something with that. I don't know. I have no, I don't remember any trick via calculus, any tool via calculus, which will tell you how to differentiate here minima or maxima.
Sir, actually, I had another general question.
Sure.
Is there any particular resources that you would recommend for problems to practice?
Well, I'm sure there are so many, but I can say the ones I have used as a student. I mean, after that, a lot of time has passed, and there must be a lot more sources. But the book by Rudin,
Okay.
and what was the other book I liked? I'm a trick of my memory. I'll remember and I'll send by email the other book. And but perhaps your TAs or students who have been a few more years senior, that they might, each of them may have a different bag of tricks, okay, or books.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Right.
Apostol. My other name which I had in mind was Apostol.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Got it, sir.
Apostol has a book on analysis, but in Apostol case, I'm not thinking of analysis. I'm talking, there is a Apostol calculus, calculus 1. It's called.
Right. Okay, sir.
Apostol calculus 1. So this Rudin, this book, elementary version, and then the Apostol. These two are my main sources to do problems and to study. So I like both these books very much.
Okay, sir. Got it, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll try to make some, I won't copy from these books because there is no point. I have already told you these books, but I'll take, think and create my own problem set and send you. So,
Sure, sir. Thanks.
So basically differentiation, at least as of now, I don't recall that something which must be done, I have ignored. Okay. Of course, could be more things, but part of our first course, whatever is needed, I think I have done. And so next week, I plan to start integration. We had a kind of a very, very brief discussion on integration, but now we'll start the formal one of this integration. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right.